just experimental because I've never live streamed or streamed full stop anything on this device before. So if you're watching live, if you could drop me a note in the chat to make sure that this is actually working and that you can hear me, that would be great, because we all know the kind of technical issues that I've had to suffer so far in 2021. That's not the reason I left, for the record. We'll get into that. But thanks to everyone for tuning in. I need to adjust my position so I'm actually on the stream. Welcome back to the tennis vlog. It's been a little while. I'm very sorry about that. It wasn't planned. Everything's happening last minute these days. I'm sure a lot of people can relate in this era of coronavirus and lockdowns and things just not working as they usually would. Thanks for letting me know that you can hear me. I wasn't here for an entire Grand Slam. We know that I'm not here often, but I'm generally here for the slams. So that was a little bit of a surprise, I'm sure, for you, definitely for me as well. I was in the middle of planning my preview video for the French Open. So anyone that follows the channel will know that these days I tend to do a preview video, just looking at who the eventual champions might be and who the contenders are. Had that planned for the French Open. In retrospect, it wouldn't have been worth your time because I would have got it completely wrong. As we now know, Novak Djokovic and Barbara Krejcikova, the eventual champions. But 3 days before the main draw was due to kick off in Roland Garros, I got a surprise call asking me to go and commentate on the event. So I had a hectic 48 hours getting the test done, getting packed up, flew to Paris, had the best week. I mainly commentated on the matches on Court Simon Mathieu, which is the third stadium court. Let's make it interesting. What players did I commentate on? The likes of Maria Sakkari, who made semis. I did Casper Ruud, who was very in form. Arina Sabalenka, I did her match against Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, which is a big match in the wider context of the tournament. And Matteo Berrettini, someone's on top of the matches that I did. Yeah, I did cover a Matteo Berrettini match. That was against Federico Coria. I believe that was second round. I did 2 or 3 matches a day, so even though it was a big week, it's difficult to remember everything that I did because I was watching other matches as well. But such a great week. That's the kind of thing that a lot of you who follow me for a number of years will know that I've been working towards. I've been doing all this other stuff just to try and get myself into that position. Obviously for love of the game as well, which is why I've kept up this channel for you guys, and that's why I've worked at so many different events. But, you know, to commentate on a Grand Slam has been a massive dream. So to be able to have that happen, and it's such last minute and such a surprise as well, was amazing. Yeah, I also did a match on Court Suzanne Lenglen. I covered Alexander Zverev's second round match against Roman Safulin. So yeah, amazing week. And given that that was the case, those that were not aware of what happens, I'm just trying to adjust this so I can sit on more easily. There we go. That's more like it. I hope you can forgive me for not being present. I was only in Paris for week 1 of competition, but when I got back home, I had to quarantine. I was also doing some remote commentary on another grass court event, and really with the kind of detailed previews that you know I like to do, it wasn't entirely possible for me to produce the same kind of quality content. And if a job is not done properly, I don't think it's worth doing. So apologies for being absent during Roland Garros, but yeah, I was otherwise occupied. I was still very much keeping across the tennis, and I'm sure you'll have seen me tweet on the stadium, etc. But that was fake news, because every night session I went onto Court Philippe Chatrier and I sat a couple of rows back at the near far baseline, even 3 or 4 meters from the likes of Federer and Nadal and Serena, Djokovic, getting a real idea of what it's like to face them in that environment, and just seeing the difference in the trajectory of their shots and stuff when you're seeing it in the flesh. It was really insightful and actually gave me a heads up for what happened to Nadal when he lost against Djokovic, because I saw him in a night match against Richard Gasquet. And it's incredible sitting courtside on Chatrier. You just feel the temperature drop. And at the beginning of the match, it was fine. He was sailing. And then there's this really sudden drop in temperature, which it just plummets within a matter of 5 to 10 minutes. And the moment the temperature plummeted, Nadal started struggling to kind of push through the court as much and cut through it. Gasquet was able to crack down and have more of an impact. And I did mention this to some people afterwards, and they kind of raised their eyebrows like, okay. But I knew that if Nadal got a night match against the likes of Djokovic, he might be in a bit of trouble, as it turned out to be the case. The moment Zverev did his classic coming back from 2-0 down against Stefanos Tsitsipas, I thought, okay, that could be a match, and a match it was. But you're not interested in that. You're more interested, from the comments that I've got, in what actually went down in the finals. I'm not going to dwell on it for too long because we've had 2 weeks of grass court competition, and I am going to throw it forward a little bit and have a look at Wimbledon and explain kind of what may or may not happen on the channel during that time as well. But yeah, so the finals, I got a few people saying, what did I think of how the finals went down? We're not going into itty bitty nitty gritty detail here because, I mean, these things have passed. But I can give you the general overview of how each final played out and why it did finish the way it did. So let's start with the final that occurred first. So Barbara Krejcikova, who pulled an incredible double, winning the women's doubles and the women's singles. Just brilliant. She'd already won Grand Slams in doubles, but this was her first title at a Grand Slam as a singles player. I just thought what she managed to accomplish with so little left in her tank was really incredible. So Krejcikova, unseeded, never having been seeded in a singles Grand Slam, but having made a decent run at the French Open last autumn, which proved that she can play effectively on the surface. She beat the number 31 seed Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova 6-1, 2-6, 6-4. A highly unexpected final, even for women's tennis, and we all know that there are about 100 lead contenders when it comes to women's tennis Grand Slams these days, which makes it intriguing, but also impossible to predict, so bear with me later on. But yeah, Krejcikova coming through that. For me, you know, Pavlyuchenkova has been a name that's been on the scene for a number of years. She was highly touted with her potential when she was a junior, back end of the 2000s. A lot of people thought she was the next big thing. Sorry, I know that I'm not always looking directly at you because this is a new device and I'm used to looking a little bit further up, and actually the lens is there. So, you know, bear with me, bear with me. Where's my train of thought? Pavlyuchenkova, okay. So I think quite a few people were backing her, thinking this is her time. You know, she'd done incredibly well. Her mentality was brilliant. Her head was finally in the right place to produce. Let's be real, both these players had decent draws for a Grand Slam. I'm not saying it was easy. It was never easy at a Grand Slam because you've got the whole mental factor. The physicality on clay is huge as well. So neither of them had it easy at all, given that they were both underdogs as well. But I would say for Pavlyuchenkova that prior to the match against Krejcikova, she'd not faced a player that mixes it up as well as Krejcikova can. She played a lot of clean, big hitters and had not really been tested in any of the ways that Krejcikova was able to test her. So what I'm really saying here is that Krejcikova's versatility won the day. Now, her lack of energy could quite easily have lost her it because she had been dead on her feet for a number of rounds. I know a member of Krejcikova's team. I was talking to him after her, it was a quarter-final win. Oh no, a semi-final win over Maria Sakkari where she faced match points, came through. He said she didn't win that match, her ghost won that match. That's how cooked she was. She'd won a title the week before. She was playing in doubles. She was exhausted, make no mistake. But she was also incredibly talented. And what also comes with a lot of matches, as well as fatigue, is match tightness. Just knowing how to play matches and knowing the moments you need to be there and having the fight and having the commitment, which she had all the way through the tournament. I think, you know, given how the physical flagging would have had an impact on her mentality as well, I thought she handled it superbly. She did have a nice draw there. I mean, number 5 seed Alina Svitolina, someone like Krejcikova is taking that hands down because she's got so much more. And I mean, I respect how Svitolina works and her focus and her determination. But as far as what's going on in their repertoire, Krejcikova, once again, just has so many options. And that's what got her through against Pavlyuchenkova. You know, I respect Pavlyuchenkova's commitment. But the thing here is that as well as she was focusing, as well as she'd done in the event, there's a ceiling for Pavlyuchenkova. She hits a nice ball, a heavy ball that can be difficult to deal with. She served brilliantly under pressure, which I thought was a huge factor in getting her to that final. But she just didn't have the depth or the options of Krejcikova. And with one final push of adrenaline, Krejcikova was going to win that match. Krejcikova is the one reason why I'm a little bit annoyed that I didn't do any preview and predictions videos during the fortnight, because I had her marked out as potential champion, her and Swiatek from quarters, just because they just had so much more going on in their games than any of the other players left in the draw. And if you look back down recent winners at the women's slams, aside from maybe Naomi Osaka, these are all players that can do so many different things on the court and don't just have plan A, but plan B, plan C, plan D. The likes of Bianca Andreescu, Iga Swiatek, Ashley Barty. That's the kind of player that's winning big. So it really didn't matter to me that Krejcikova hadn't done as much on the singles tour. She was in good form and she had the weapons to get it done. And that's the story there. So moving on to the men's final, which was Novak Djokovic coming from 2 sets to love down to beat Stefanos Tsitsipas. Final scoreline was, if I can find it, 6-7, 2-6, 6-3, 6-2, 6-4. I'm sure some of you probably knew that off the top of your heads, but hey ho, there's been a lot going on. Yeah, Tsitsipas had the 2 sets to love lead. You can't really ask for better in a Grand Slam final, but he could have asked for a lot more experience, and that was the bottom line in this match. Again, I could go deep into things technically. I could look at individual moments. There was one key moment that stood out in this match. This match, for me, in my opinion, was won and lost when Novak Djokovic broke for 3-1 in the 3rd set. I said it to my family who were in the room at the time. It's incredible, really, the slim margins at this stage of an event and how something so small as Tsitsipas tightening up and Djokovic loosening up can make the biggest difference midway through a match. But that was ultimately what happened here. So Tsitsipas for the first 2 sets playing a really great, he's been in such good form across the clay court season, across the season as a whole. Himself and Daniel Medvedev and I would say Dominic Thiem, but poor guy is having a really tough time at the moment. But those two are really starting to step it up. As far as best of 3 sets goes, very little now between them and the likes of Djokovic, Nadal, Federer when he's around, and such consistency from them. But this match was example 101 of why best of 5 sets exists, because it is the ultimate physical and mental test, and you have to be there right from the first point to the last point, and Tsitsipas wasn't. But yeah, first 2 sets, really brave tennis, really going for it in some high pressure situations. That first set was the kind of set that Djokovic loves and Djokovic often takes, but Tsitsipas really went for the lines and got on top of some long rallies at the back end of that to come through. And then 6-2 in the 2nd set, Djokovic looked a little bit flat after the Nadal win, and Tsitsipas looked really focused, really secure. And it just was that break of serve for Djokovic, 3-1. I think it was quite a long game. And the body language, the demeanor, the aura just changed for Tsitsipas from there. Even at 2 sets to love up, he was suddenly playing not to lose, and Djokovic loosened up, was playing to win. And the moment he's won that 3rd set, he's the favorite because he's come through so many matches like this, and that experience just can't be compared. Even for someone, as talented as Tsitsipas is, you just can't compete with that when you've got these mental battles going on. And Tsitsipas is doing great work, I think, at the moment. Next couple of years we're going to see him taking more steps. But I said, for anyone who watched at the beginning of the year, I will not predict the likes of Medvedev or Tsitsipas to win a Grand Slam until someone has won a Grand Slam beating one of Djokovic, Nadal or Federer on the way, because that's still such a huge task. Medvedev came so close at the Australian Open, and Djokovic was that roadblock once again. People, I think, still don't fully understand how big of a deal these guys are and how big of a roadblock they are when it comes to this format, because they've had so much experience, not just at Grand Slams, but at Masters 1000 events when the finals there used to be best of 5 sets. And for Djokovic, he was just that mental beast who knew exactly when to peak. It was never too late, even though people were writing him off left, right, and centre, as they do, as they will continue to. I'm sure it will even happen maybe at Wimbledon, but we move our attention to Wimbledon. I did spend a little while on those, but I've had quite a few questions. So I hope that they were answered there. If you want to leave some questions, I'll have a little look at the chat at the end of my little Wimbledon preview and I'll address anything that's relevant. So thanks to everyone tuning in live. I did anticipate that it would be quite a small turnout because I literally decided to do this evening. But of course, as is always the case, if you're not here live, then this will be up to be viewed at a later date. So cheers to everyone that's made it live. And if you haven't, no worries. You can hear me ramble later on and you can also I think you can double the speed, which I know some of my friends that watch, they do watch on double the speed because it's really just not worth listening to me for this long. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. Your choice. Right. Okay. Wimbledon. The draws are out. And once the draws are out, people like to hear a prediction for the eventual champion. So I'm just going to come at you with the names that I think are the most obvious names to pick to win the event. We know that it's horrendously unpredictable on the women's side. I feel like there's a lot of expectation with this now because the Australian Open preview that I did in January was bang on. I said Djokovic and Osaka, but I'm not going to big that up. That was, I think, fairly straightforward for anyone that had been following the tours. But on the women's side, you just never know, as Krejcikova shows. So what do we think about Wimbledon? I've not studied the draws in detail yet. I've had a quick look over them. I think that really, unless there was a kind of a massive dangerous floater, the draws weren't going to make too much difference with where I instinctively was going with this. So let's start with the women's, shall we? Let's get that out of the way. I'm not going to say who I think will win. I'm going to say who should win this event, okay? Because without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, if she is fully fit, the player who should win this event is Ashley Barty. And that's not a massively out there prediction. It's not kind of big news, but I'm quite convinced of this just because of the consistency of Barty, her artillery, the way that she's thrived on grass over the years, the way that she is just, for me, as the rankings suggest, the best player in the world right now. She's also, at Wimbledon in particular, lacking some key competition. So Iga Swiatek would be a big threat on any other surface, but she's still very much finding her feet on grass, as Eastbourne showed. Naomi Osaka isn't present, and she's not really got it going on grass courts yet either. Bianca Andreescu is a threat wherever she goes, but she's constantly injured, the poor girl. And Serena Williams is in a mental wilderness when it comes to the back end of a Grand Slam. I've said it once, I'll say it again, I've said it a million times. I'll never write Serena off until she writes herself off, but she does just go to pieces at the back end of slams these days. Generally in finals, she loses her first serve, she loses her composure, everything goes. But even slightly before that, nowadays at the Australian Open semi-finals against Osaka, she was up, she was fine, she hit a couple of unforced errors and she just completely lost it. She's like a different player really in terms of her demeanor and the process that she goes through at the back end of these majors. She used to be untouchable. Now, with certain players dropping out and things being so unpredictable, I think Serena will be a key opponent for Barty here. I think that Barty will be disappointed to see Serena has fallen into her half as opposed to the other half of the draw, because at the moment it sounds ridiculous to say it, but you want to face Serena in a final because that's when everything goes, so whereas before the final, that trophy isn't directly on the line, so she's more likely to, have that focus, and also she has a good record against Barty and would take that confidence into the match. So that could be a tricky one for Barty, but all I'm saying here is that if Barty is 100% fit, in my opinion, this is a tournament that she should be winning. The biggest red flag for me when I say that is that with Barty, it's been the case throughout her career that she does struggle when there is that kind of expectation upon her. Let's look at the only Grand Slam that she's won to date, Roland Garros, okay? Clay was looked at as her worst surface at that point. So the internal and external expectation, despite the fact she was on the ascendancy up the rankings and with her form, it wasn't there to the extent that it has been at, say, the last two Australian Opens, when she's been looking convincing and playing well. And on both occasions, first against Sophia Kenin in the semi-finals of 2019, 2020. COVID's made me lose track. 2020. And then in the quarterfinals against Karolina Muchova earlier this year, she was facing a very winnable situation and very visibly went tight. Painful to watch, really felt for her. Just completely lost, the pace on her shots, the forehands, even the serve, everything just letting her down. And I just wonder if she does become center of attention at Wimbledon, if that kind of thing might happen again. Now, she's not at home, so that might be in her favor because she doesn't have that home pressure. But I do think that is a potential danger with Barty. That aside, in my opinion, she should be winning this. So if you pushed me to say a name that I think will win, I guess I'd say Barty, but as I always say, the obvious option tends not to go all the way, with the exception of Naomi Osaka at the Australian Open and maybe the US Open last year. Times are changing, to be fair. I mean, I always said that the player that wins a tournament the week before a major doesn't win the major itself, but then Krejcikova and Djokovic both played and won tournaments the week before Roland Garros and then won Roland Garros. So these are strange times, as they say. And it might give Daniil Medvedev a little bit of a chance as we quickly transition over to the men's tour. I'm not going to beat around the bush. This is Djokovic's title to win or lose once again. If there was any surface that Djokovic was kind of dropping off on, it was clay. He'd been beaten by Dominic Thiem there a couple of times. Thiem had established himself as the clear-cut second best player on dirt, and so it must have been painful for him to sit there and watch Djokovic win the French and Nadal have his drop-off when he did. But yeah, for Djokovic to then go and win the French Open, at the time I was like, well, yeah, if Nadal's not going to win the French, it's probably going to be Djokovic. But then you sit there and you think about kind of the course that Djokovic's career has taken in recent years, and he had that loss to Lorenzo Sonego in Rome coming into the event, or was it a near defeat? I can't remember. There were one or two defeats anyway that had people throwing question marks. Someone can tell me what happened. I've got so much going on at the moment. But yeah, I think that Djokovic made a real statement to not just the world, but the rest of the field when he won the French Open, and two-time defending champion of Wimbledon. Mentally, I think the best player on tour right now, and that's where he always edges Roger Federer for me. If you remember Wimbledon 2019 final, I always bring this up. I said Djokovic to win in 5 sets on the basis of mentality. It's exactly what happened. Federer served for the match. He had 2 championship points. Djokovic didn't drop off, didn't blink, didn't flinch, and that's what makes him so tough. To this day, I don't think that either Djokovic or Federer played their best match during that encounter, and it did come to who had the head for it. That was Djokovic. Djokovic does have an interesting draw. I was very interested to see him draw British wildcard Jack Draper in the first round. A number of people will have been aware of Draper for a few years. I've watched him go from Futures events to Challengers to that run at Queens the other week, which will have brought him to everyone's attention. And he's promising, and you always want to catch Djokovic at the beginning of an event. The deeper into the event you face him, the less your chances are, unless you are a Nadal or a Federer, etc. you want to try and get him cold. And with that huge lefty serve that Jack has, he'll be getting some cheap points. And there will be nerves, and mentally it will be tough. But I think that is a very interesting opener for Djokovic. I'd still take Djokovic to win it, of course. But it'll be interesting to see how he goes early rounds. There's a qualifier, Dennis Kudla, lurking there as well, who's just brilliant on grass courts. Has had some really strong showings and has come through qualifying, so he's in form. But ultimately, it's best of 5, isn't it? It's that experience that comes up time and time again and gets players across the line. And, you know, Djokovic really does have a draw that he should come through up until the final. Like I say, I haven't gone into it in detail yet, but from surface overview, you're taking Djokovic from that half, really. And then Roger Federer is over on the other half. Played down by a lot of people. I get that. I understand it. He's not been around on tour as much as he would have been. But Federer has traditionally produced his best results in this stage of his career when the expectations are low. Let's look at when he came back after the first knee operation in 2016, won the Australian Open, won Wimbledon, won the Australian Open again. That Australian Open 2017 run was particularly noteworthy because he just swung. You could tell there was zero pressure on his shoulders, and he came through an impressive list of victims as well. You know, I don't look at his age so much. I think that talent doesn't die, and as long as he's on court uninjured, he's able to produce. For me, with Federer, it has been a mental issue for him at the Slams, as we saw in the 2019 final. And for me, it's really a case of whether he can keep a lid on that. I would definitely have, outside of Djokovic, I'd definitely have Federer up there as a lead contender. As to whether I'd predict him over Djokovic, I'd have to look at the event went, if he got that far. He's got a tough opener against Adrian Manarino, but I definitely still have Federer up there. And ahead of the event, ahead of the draw, I would have been saying that Daniil Medvedev is one to keep in consideration. Like I say, he still hasn't won a Grand Slam, beating one of the big 3 and, you know, coming across the line in best of 5 sets. But he was so close against Nadal at the 2019 US Open. And again, you know, Medvedev showed, how do I say this? He proved a few points at the French Open when he made quarterfinals, when a lot of people, not myself, but a lot of people had been kind of writing him off because he hates clay. I think a lot of players like that kind of thrive when they've got points to prove or when no one's expecting much of them. And yeah, he was thoroughly outplayed by, I think, Tsitsipas it was. But it's a similar situation with grass courts where he had, prior to this week, when he just won the title in Mallorca, he hadn't really made a run on it before. And he's someone that does have a little bit more best of 5 set experience than other players. He was red hot at the back end of last year and at the back end of 2019. And Medvedev, for me, is just one of the elite talents at the moment. So I'd definitely be giving Medvedev a shot as well. It would be very interesting if he was to come up against Federer, but to avoid rambling too much, how long have I gone? Oh my days, almost half an hour. Novak Djokovic would be the name that I would give you. So I hope that that satisfies a few questions that were being asked. Another question is the channel reviving during Wimbledon? Now listen carefully. First up, if you follow me on my social media channels, you would have known exactly where I was during the Paris fortnight because I put it everywhere. Also, I put it on the if you go on the channel, on the tennis vlog, there's this little column that says, I think, community. And sometimes I post there to advertise for one of these live streams is going to happen, or to say where I am in the world and explain why I'm not on YouTube to save me having to make a video about it like this one. So if you follow me on Twitter, Instagram at Abigail Tennis, or if you check the community tab on my channel, you will know where I am, or you will know the fact that I'm not here. But as a heads up for Wimbledon, I'm still not 100% sure what my plans are for the fortnight. As things stand, I'm not going to be there in a capacity that I was at the French Open. Sad times, but is what it is. but I don't know how things are going to play out. I've referenced, several times on the channel, people know what my career is off YouTube, and the fact that I have to be flexible in order to kind of build on what I've done so far. So I can't promise a tight upload schedule like I used to have, at least during the majors. We'd have end of round Q&As, and then we'd have preview and predictions videos from quarterfinals onwards. I can't promise that that is going to happen this time around. So if you follow me on the channels that I mentioned previously, Twitter and Instagram at Abigail Tennis, and then on the community heading on this channel, you'll know when I'm uploading. And if nothing else comes up, I will try and do the end of round Q&As and the preview and predictions in the second week, but I just don't know at this point. So stay tuned, and as promised, before I disappear off and let you go to bed if you're in the UK, or let you get on with your lives if you're elsewhere, I'll go through some of the questions. Now, I had one left before at the beginning from Edgar. Hello, Edgar. Thank you for your support over the years. He says, do you see Krejcikova winning more slams than singles, or will she just join the list of one slam wonders? Very good question, because, this term one slam wonder sounds, I know you don't mean it like this, but just to me over the years, it sounds a little bit disrespectful to the effort that goes into winning a major. But yeah, there are players, the likes of, I won't name names, you know them, there are players that have only won one Grand Slam and have never been seen again on that particular stage. With the, the weaponry that she has, and the mindset that she has, and how comfortable she is with match play, I think Krejcikova has everything necessary to win another Grand Slam, but then so do a lot of players. And, with the women's field so open, you just can't write her off. Yeah, I'm not saying that she will, but I can 100% see her winning another slam. She's still fairly young, she's 25. She's not, she's a later bloomer, but she's not a late bloomer. And, she certainly has all the tools to give players trouble across surfaces as well. She's even a contender or a threat at Wimbledon. And so she's had all that doubles experience as well, which I think really helped her in the singles final at Roland Garros, just to be able to compose herself, that kind of thing. So yeah, I can see her winning another one. That could be in 2 weeks' time. That could be 6 years down the line. At the moment, you just never know. But, with things as open as they are, and her as talented as she is, why not? So there's that one. Really nice to see quite a few people tune in, even though it's quite late in the UK. Coco Gauff's chances at Wimbledon, as big as anyone else's, essentially. Yeah, she's got an interesting opener. She's playing a Brit, right? She's playing Fran Jones. So that will be interesting. Very interesting match, because Gauff is obviously usually a crowd favorite. And even from when she was 15 years old and coming in as a qualifier, she utilized that. She is the kind of player that thrives in that environment. I'm still of the opinion that if her match against Polona Herzog had not been on center court with the crowd pulling for her in the manner that they did, I don't think she'd have won that match. And I maintain that that was not a high quality match at all from the pair of them. They're both capable of much better. It was won and lost on tension. But yeah, I think that she's got a very interesting opener there, because she's not going to be the one that everyone is pulling for. And I know Fran, she's a very fierce competitor. She's got a great forehand that can work really well on this kind of surface, and I think she could give Gauff trouble. I'm not calling the upset outright, but I think that before you look any further with Gauff, she's got a really difficult first round there, and there's going to be a lot of eyes on that particular match, I think. So that's my thoughts on Gauff. What did I think of Katie Swan's performance in qualifying? Should she have had a major wildcard in the first place? Katie did a fantastic job. Look, she's had such a tough 2 or 3 years with injury. She was one of the most promising British juniors, and then wasn't really able to build on that because of the physical and mental setbacks that she's gone through which made it all the more impressive that she could hold her nerve the way she did to come through qualifying, because she had a tough one against Arina Rodionova in the third round, who, I mean, doesn't let you get comfortable either with the way that she plays or with kind of her manner and her demeanor on the court as well. She had an injury as well, which might have been a bit distracting. And there was definite nerves and tightness for Swan in that second set after she'd won the first set straightforwardly. I think the final score was 6-love, 6-4. So to see her come through the way she did was brilliant. And, you know, even last year when we had all the domestic events going on in GB, she wasn't really able to feature because she, you know, picked up injury again. I know she was quite gutted about that. And so, yeah, she's just really worked for this and really earned it. And I think that, you know, you could quite easily say that she should maybe have had a major wildcard, as you could with, I think, one or two other Brits that were in qualifying on the men's side and women's. But at the end of the day, I think qualifying can actually do a lot more for you than that major wildcard, where, you know, one or two of them are going to go out round one and not really have had the chance to get going. Swan has proved there that, you know, she's got the mentality, and it's a huge deal for her to have earned her way into the draw, because, you know, the Brits will get a lot of criticism that they get the leg up here, you know, that they get the helping hands. And, you know, even though she had that wild card into qualifying, without the injuries and stuff, she'd have been in qualifying anyway. And she's just proven that, you know, she has the ability to work her way through on her own merit. So, you know, they were the cards that she was dealt, and she handled them brilliantly and came through some tough opposition. You know, she had Katie McNally second round as well, and that's a run she could be really pleased with. So, well done to her. Serena Williams versus Angelique Kerber is a possible third round match. Kerber just won a title. True story. As I say, I am still a little bit skeptic when a player wins a title the week before a slam, and particularly if it's in a different country and then you're transferring conditions, you haven't had as much time to practice, etc. You know, Serena's been at Wimbledon for a number of days now, getting warmed up. It's interesting because obviously they've played a couple of times in Wimbledon finals, and Serena in the past has been a player who's kind of, when it comes to results, she's almost held a grudge and kind of gone out there and used that as fire under her feet. So yeah, it would be really interesting to see which way that match went. It really depends on how quickly Kerber can adjust, but she has been slowly but steadily gaining confidence again, so that's big for her. I'm not going to answer all these questions about could so-and-so go a fair distance, because like I say, I've not gone that deep into the draws at present, so I don't want to ramble needlessly. But, you know, there are always dangerous floaters. I don't agree that Federer is done. I haven't agreed that Federer is done since people were saying that in 2011, 2012. This is a huge year for Federer, and this is really going to test where his mentality is at, because, you know, I admit time is passing, and he himself will know that this is, particularly with some key names absent like Nadal and Thiem, this is a huge year for him to push through and get back into that slam winning form. And that's the biggest test of where his mentality is at in terms of his ability to shoulder that. Because for me, the ability for Federer is still there, the tactical awareness, all that kind of thing, he's got it. But, you know, sometimes against someone like Djokovic, he just looks a bit fragile. And can he keep that under control? That's the biggest question with Federer for me. People wondering if his body will hold up. Well, I understand the concerns about whether he will actually be physically 100%, because obviously he's been off tour for a while with injury. So I think those are very valid concerns, but I wouldn't be concerned for him as far as his ability as a player goes. I think that, you know, experience shows itself at the end of the day, and this is a place where he's had a lot of success. So that's always going to come in handy. What are your thoughts on Andy Murray's first round match? Does he have Basilashvili? I think. Yeah, with Murray these days, it's a tough one because you never quite know where he's at physically. and he hasn't been able to get out on court enough to get that match play and get that match fitness. But at the same time, he's Andy Murray. He'll have a roaring crowd behind him, so it's never going to shock me, even at this stage, if he gets to quarters or beyond at a major. But he would not be a lead contender for me to win the title. And as the stiffness of that draw shows, he's up against it from the offset, so can't afford to look too far ahead. What about Berrettini? I wondered if someone was going to say this. What about Matteo Berrettini? Yeah, he's in fine form. And, you know, huge serve, huge forehand. He's transferred his form brilliantly from clay to grass. Do I see him winning a slam yet? I mean, if those, again, that have followed me for a number of years will say, no, that I think I said he was the most underrated player of 2019. So talented, and grass courts tend to be the fastest surface when they haven't been slowed down like heck. So that's something that he can really utilize. But once again, it just comes down to that best of 5 sets thing, and I'm not sure if he's had enough experience with that yet. Like, he was looking good in Paris as well, and it didn't go deep there. So with the style of game that he likes to play, Wimbledon and the state of the draw at the moment is probably a good opportunity for him. And yeah, he definitely could be a threat. I'm not sure at this point that I would pick him to go all the way. Come back to me at quarters or semis if he's still in, and I might have a different story. But at this point in time, I wouldn't put him up there with Djokovic and Federer. And people might think me a bit crazy with that when it comes to Federer, but I think sometimes history counts for more than form, particularly with someone of Federer's status and accomplishments. So, yes. Kyrgios and Shapovalov, correct pronunciation, sorry. Yeah, they're always big threats, always. My thoughts about Nick Kyrgios facing Hugo Humbert in the first round. I hope that's kind of a redeeming match for Humbert, because when he played Federer, my days, when he played Nick Kyrgios at the Australian Open, he had to compete in an awful environment. Like, the crowd just made life so tough on that day. And really, you know, he was playing at such a high level. That was a match that he should have won, and got a little bit tight. So I think it would be really nice for him on a surface that he's so promising on to come through. But, you know, Kyrgios, despite the fact that he hasn't played since January, that kind of thing seems to work in his favor, because Kyrgios can't seem to handle when he puts internal expectation on himself. He has to go out there swinging like, I haven't played in 5 months, so if I lose, well, it's expected, but if I win, everyone thinks I'm great. So that's kind of the mentality that Kyrgios plays with, and it seems to help him because he is so naturally talented. He loves the grass court. He gets up for the big matches. He respects Humbert, so I would expect him to bring it from the first stage. If Humbert can make that a tight physical match, that's where he could have the upper hand, because if Kyrgios hasn't been playing, you can't physically prepare for a best of 5 set match. Like, he's had no no lead-in tournaments for this. So that is something that should really be in Humbert's favor, but no one wants to face Kyrgios at a slam at any stage. And yeah, there will probably be some tightness there. How would I rate Marian Cilic's chances? Well, you know, he has found some form, but, you know, that grass court title that he won, I think the draw could have been a bit stiffer. Will definitely have given him some confidence, which is huge for him, because he was on such a poor run from his perspective, knowing that his ability and what he's able to do. You know, he's been to the final here before. He has that big serving, flat hitting game that can be so difficult, particularly if you're not used to moving on a grass court. The backhand takes a lot of time away from you. But he, you know, again, I don't want to comment too much because I'm not sure of his position in the draw, and that can have a lot of bearing. But he's definitely a dangerous floater, I would say. I wouldn't have said that if he hadn't won that title. But confidence is big for someone with his experience and accomplishments to date. So thanks everyone for the support, as things have improved in terms of my career and the opportunities that I've had. I appreciate the understanding of me not being around. You know, this is the YouTube channel. I'm sure some people know this, but this was a project that I started up at university, and I just kind of I kept it going because it had an audience and it had people that were interested, and it gave me an outlet for my pages of analysis and stuff that didn't have a platform elsewhere. You know, that is slowly changing, but I appreciate that I have an audience here that's been supportive and that does keep coming back. So thank you very much for that. And I will try and stay around here, even if it's not as regularly as it has been. And we know it's not been regular anyway in recent times. So thoughts about Alexander Zverev on grass? Do you think he could reach the final? Look, Zverev can make the final on any surface if he really wants to. He's just so up and down, and you just never really know what you're going to get with him. I still think that there's a big step between his A game and his next best, but I think he's starting to close that gap. And I think he has probably a lot of motivation with the other guys stepping up now, your Medvedevs and your Tsitsipas's. You know, he was so close to Tsitsipas, nearly won the title in that semi-final at the French Open. And because those guys are improving, Zverev, who was always at the forefront and had those brilliant results early on, is now kind of below the radar. And I think that that works in his favor a little bit. So Zverev definitely wants to keep an eye on. I'm just pausing a moment because I saw this buffer and I'm just wondering about the connection. We all know how dodgy my Wi-Fi is. I think we're okay. I'm going to keep going. Okay. I'm going to wrap up soon just because I've been here for nearly 50 minutes, but I've seen a few more. There's a lot of questions about the Brits at the moment. I mean, I have basically just worked in British tennis for the last year, so I'm definitely not against talking about it. What do I think about Arthur Ferry, who did great by getting to the third round of qualifying, lost a tough 5-setter, almost qualified? He's such a talent. Like I've commentated on so many matches featuring British players over the past year, and Ferry was one that stood out to me immediately. Just, I mean, he's one of the players that really has that X factor as well, and he's just he brings so much energy to the court. Like he goes from 0 to 10 when he steps up to serve, and that explosiveness that he has and the manner with which he goes about his game, that's a perfect fit for grass. He had a fairly tough qualifying draw as well, and was 2-0 up on Greek Spore. And it was, you know, I'm going back to the Tsitsipas Djokovic scenario. I think it was ultimately lack of experience that cost him. He was 2-0 up. He lost 2 tie breaks in sets 3 and 4, and then lost in 5 sets, which is utterly heartbreaking for him because he was so close to that main draw. Would have totally earned his way there. You know, he's currently ranked outside the top 1,000, which does not represent the kind of tennis that he's capable of. He's currently at university, so he's not competing internationally all the time, so that number is not going to be an accurate representation. But you're going to see a lot more from Arthur Ferry for sure. He's still just a teenager, and he's been showing his potential for a couple years now, if not more. So yeah, he's definitely one of the promising British players for me. And yeah, I've not forgotten about Anton Matusovic. I'd never forget about Matusovic, another player that I've watched countless times over the past year. Matusovic for me is one of those players that I would have given a main draw wildcards. He had a great run in Nottingham. His game is made for grass. He's got a huge forehand. He's got a great serve, very consistent backhand, particularly cross court. He's just such a well-rounded player already. You know, he's 20, he's young. He's come through mentally really well in the past year. There's still a way to go, but, you know, he's an insanely good player to me. I think he's going to be very, very good. He's just not been able to compete internationally as much. Similar situation to Ferry. I mean, he's not at a university physically, but he's just not been competing on the tour as much as other players in recent times. I think if that had been the case, he would have got that main draw wildcard. You know, he was on the brink, he was so close. But again, as I said with Swan and as with these other players, that qualifying experience can count for so much more. You know, he was on the brink of that main draw and will take so much away from that experience of a first best of 5 set match. the match wins that he was able to get under his belt before that. Yeah, I think sometimes if you're looking at this long term instead of the immediate, maybe it was a better route ultimately and will work out better in the long run. Thank you. It is good to be back as well. As someone says, Nadal clearly seemed to be injured in the French Open. I did see someone come out today and say that Nadal had a foot injury, which answered a couple of questions for me because, you know, without question in my mind, Nadal should have won that third set against Djokovic. He made a couple of errors, a handful of errors that he would just not make in high pressure situations. Usually, Djokovic did keep himself alive. He saved a set point with a magnificent drop shot. Some of the rallies that Djokovic was keeping going were unreal. And even though he kind of choked a little bit, Djokovic, when he was serving for that set, he did well to come through it. Ultimately, you know, Nadal had the set point. Felt it was a set he could have won, should have won. And if he had won that set, despite the conditions, would probably have seen Nadal coming through, but he did seem strangely flat in that fourth set and kind of resigned to his fate almost, which is totally out of character for Nadal. It was almost as if he had kind of accepted the situation, and the moment someone came out and said that he was not fully fit, I thought, oh, okay, that does, in terms of the way he was on court, yeah, it definitely made a bit of sense to me, I think. Okay, I'm just looking down. Right. Okay. I'm calling it a day. I'm going to wrap it up there. I think I've answered the majority of questions. And some of you have hung around, which is really nice. So thank you very much for turning up. Thank you for the support over time of the channel and my occasionally horrendous predictions and that kind of thing. I was really touched actually by the number of people that commented and DM'd saying, where are you? Even though I thought where I was pretty obvious, you know, it was nice to know that people actually cared enough to ask where I was and why stuff wasn't happening. So yeah, thanks for caring. Thank you for tuning in. And as I say, Wimbledon plans are unknown, but hopefully this tides you over for a bit. Enjoy the tennis. Keep across my socials and the channel, the community column, to know when I will be uploading. We'll have, if I do upload, it will be live, so you can then try and tune in when it's happening, as it happens. So there we go. Thank you so much. Really appreciate seeing the lovely comments. It's made my evening. Thank you very much. And whenever it might be, I'm just working out how to turn this off because I've never filmed on this. But yeah, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.